Diaries. It is day 11 today, Sunday the 5th of April, and it is a little bit grey and a little bit cool here in Hawke's Bay today, and I have to admit I've pulled out a little bit of a wrap because I do have a heater here in the front shed, but it's a fan heater and it makes an awful amount of noise, so I decided to rug up a little bit and stay nice and warm for you, so then that way we can chat about what we're going to talk about today. I've got a few things that I want to talk about. First, though, I will give you my progress with my Rambla sweater. I only worked yesterday morning. I have to say, I'm actually working this week. I mean, I've worked the same sort of hours as I normally would in a sale week. It's been sort of crazy busy, and I knew this was going to happen. I pulled all of this out so I could have everything sitting, and I've dropped the stitch. My needles have slipped out and stitches are going everywhere. Let's pick all those up. Right, it's a nice thing about grippy yarn. Your needle falls out, but the stitches stay nice and intact. So I only worked yesterday morning. Ethan and I, if you caught the diaries yesterday, I had Ethan Barclay Inu from, and Deb off to the side, from Outlaw Yarn, and I couldn't believe we nearly did an hour. That's what happens when you get two people together that like to talk, right? And so after we did that, it was nice. I was actually able to go back. We had got a bit of amount of knitting on this. We had the Great Catan battle. I don't know if you guys are board game people. We're not huge board game people, but you know, we've got kids who love games, and if you've not played Catan before, it's fantastic. If you've been given it or you have it sitting on that bookshelf at home gathering dust, drag it out. I mean, we had 2 hours on that yesterday afternoon with the kids. It was hysterical, like so funny. It was great. In fact, so we're sort of playing Catan nearly every day. It's been really, really good. Anyway, while I was playing Catan, I was also knitting, and I'm really pleased, and I've done a bit again this morning. I'll pick it up because I'm into, there we go. Morning, Barbara. Morning, Jeanette. Morning, Shirley. Look at that. I am so pleased with this. So the colour here that I'm just pointing to there, that is my Noro. So that was sort of the foundation yarn for this project, as it were. So I've been building this entire project around this ball of yarn, which is a ball of yarn that I had in my stash. I mean, that's the thing that I actually forgot a full ball of Noro sitting here. No. Noro, I mean, it's 300 meters on a ball, and I think it's 300, yes, 300. And I had that ball, and I made a cowl for a gift, and it was my Ever After cowl, which is free on Ravelry, and it's just a feather and fan, very simple cowl. And what I did is that I had the black pearl this is called Barbosa, and I did the two together sort of in the stripy things in this dark black pearl with this Noro, and it looked fantastic. And I didn't photograph it. I didn't even put it up on Ravelry. Didn't even think it was something I was whipping out really, really quickly. And anywho, ended up with quite a bit of. I didn't use anywhere near as much as the Noro as I thought, because I used that as my foundation. So I've still got a little bit of that left, a ball and a bit of that. So then had this left over, and I mean, I love the stuff. It's really amazing. But you know, she's not the cheapest yarn in the world, people. So one wants to make sure that you use it, really. So that's where the inspiration came for the Rambla sweater, and here we are. So I'm really happy with it. And since I've added the Noro there, it's actually helped this blue here pop. Initially, when I started that blue, it was sort of, I think it's okay, but it was looking very recessive. But once I've added the Daring, which is the mustard, so that's Little Bandit Daring, it's looking great. So it is really starting to tie together. As you can see in the Noro, there is this sort of little black section here. I am yet undecided, if I get to a black section in the colour work, whether or not I'll actually maintain the black section. I might just maintain a whisper of it, because the last thing I want is a whopping great big stripe through the middle of it of black. I just think that it'll just pull your eye to it straight away. But I can have little whispers of it all the way through. So I haven't quite decided yet. The nice thing about Noro is that it's a woolen spun yarn. And as you can see, it's quite rustic, right? Now, I'm not going to pull this too hard, because if you know anything about woolen spun yarns, that it's a short fibre process. So you have a whole bunch of short fibres. They've all been combed sort of out, or sort of matted out really and carded, but they are all short fibres and they're lying all cross-directionally from each other. So we do a worsted spun process, so that's a bit like hand spinning. You've got lots of lovely long fibres and they're all nice and long and flowing like beautiful locks, and then you spin them. Well, woolen spun is a little bit, you still have it all coming in roughly in a direction, but you've got lots of short fibres like this. And then you take those fibres, you pull them out, and you add twist. But if I pull this, because the fibres aren't very long, it will actually pull in quite readily, which is good. Two-pronged, good thing. Good, because if I want to whip out that black section, I can then basically, when I get to it, pull out the colour until I get the black section, just break it apart, and it's easy for me to splice those back together, just like you would never know. So I'm undecided. I'm up to the where am I up to? I am up to the first. So every sort of round is you're pretty much repeating the same round twice, and I'm up to the second to last round using this for the first pass, and then I'm on to about, I think, 2 rounds of Noro on its own, which I'm really looking forward to, just to sort of go and just have 2 rounds where I'm not having to strand anything. So that should be good. So that is actually tracking along quite well. And then once I get through the colour work, the body should be really, really easy and straightforward. Also, once I get through the colour work and then divide for the sleeves, from there I should be able to measure it up against my body, see where it's sitting and how it's looking. I can then mark out where I want my halfway points underneath the arms, because it does actually look like that this one has a marker sitting in the back of the neck, so I will need to readjust that. And then from that, I will I actually put in some very, very subtle shaping, just to give me some extra shaping, because I am very pear-shaped. So I want to make sure that it's not going to, the last thing I want is a jumper that finishes and is going to cling to the mummy tum and onto bits that I really don't want it to cling onto, because it's just not attractive for anybody, really. So progress on that is going really well. Was feeling totally uninspired, I have to say, this morning, and I was really struggling to decide what to talk to you about. And then you come out to the shed, and I had to do a little bit of a rework and a relook at what Ethan and I talked about yesterday. And as it was like, ping, I got the inspiration for where we need to go. So what I wanted to talk about today was actually something that we talked about yesterday, and it's sort of carrying on the theme that we've been doing in terms of using up those scraps or unicorns skeins, making sure that we go through it and looking at actually projects for yarns and stuff that we can use up that we have got lying around, or those weird and wonderful bits and pieces, and creating something really wonderful and beautiful. And it's almost a bit like, when you look at it, and I'm sure we're all doing this at the moment, we're all standing in front of the refrigerator at each mealtime going, what can I cobble together to make today? And it's actually, in a way, it's necessity is the mother of all invention, right? And you're able to, I think, start creating something quite wonderful, but you just need to have that little inspired push in one direction or another, and actually using up all those other bits and pieces is, can be something quite inspiring, quite amazing. So one of the things we talked about yesterday on the show that just happened to come up is when we were talking about, sorry, frog in the throat, when we were talking about Stephen West yesterday, one of the themes that we were talking about is his triangle theme, and Deb has been working on his triangle. I think it's triangle shawl, and it's essentially a triangular version of a log cabin pattern. Now, I'm not a sewer or a quilter, but the log cabin pattern I know is a motif that's been very common in quilting for a very, very long time. And a number of years ago, these two ladies here, which are Anne Shea and Kay Gardner, and they are known as Mason-Dixon Knitting. Now, Mason-Dixon Knitting were they've been bloggers for a long time. They were in that in the early part of the online blogosphere for our community, and they are still very much going strong. They're absolutely fantastic, and they're a real hoot. And they're called Mason-Dixon Knitting because one of them lives in the south and one lives in the north. And if you know anything about American history, the Mason-Dixon line is sort of this border, as it were, in the US that divides it into north and south. So Charles, that we spoke to the other day, he's from Georgia, so he's very much southern. So they are quite, and in fact, I think Anne is in New York and Kay, I've got a funny feeling, is in Tennessee. If somebody can confirm that, let me know. But I think she's in Tennessee. So they are, they're really fantastic. And what I like this was a gift, this book, years ago. And what I love about them is that rereading this and re-going over this is that a lot of stuff that they have published, it's all very simple, it's very practical, it's very easy to execute. This book has an entire chapter on knitting and crafts that you can do with children at home, and actually I'm hoping to do a quarantine diary with things that you could possibly do with the kids at home. So I'll pull this out, might do an experiment with one of my boys. It is what I call a usable book. And you forget you have these wonderful resources. So anyway, Log Cabin. They did a log cabin blanket and they converted it into knitting. There it is. So they've done multiple versions. I did one of these and I would have so dearly loved. I knitted one of these huge big blankets and made the world's biggest dog bed. And that's actually a mitered blanket there, but there it is, how to log cabin. And you're essentially, or it's modular. So modular knitting is quite straightforward. Modular knitting, you start with a piece of knitting, generally a square, and then with modular knitting, you're picking up stitches down one edge or one side, and then knitting more. And then in the case of this blanket, you knit a rectangle or a square, then you pick up, you rotate it, and then you pick up stitches, this is all done in garter stitch, you knit some more, rotate at 90 degrees, pick up stitches across that length, knit another log, rotate at 90 degrees, and you just essentially keep going. Very, very straightforward. I've been very good this time. I have picked up, I'm going to put the links all in. I have actually pre-done the links today. So it is loads of fun. And I mean, there's lots of different ways for it to be interpreted. So you don't just have to follow a certain prescription with colour. I've got a cushion. It's a pity because the cushion, of course, is quarantined back at the shop. It's on one of our chairs in our office at the shop. But I love this particular motif. I've got one just made up from scraps, and it's what I call the crazy log cabin because I just went completely random on the textures, completely random on the colours. I essentially pulled together all these different yarns of the same weight, put them in a bag, and then it was luckied up. I knitted whatever I pulled out of the bag. That's what I knit for that log, and then I'd rotate, and then whatever I pulled out of the bag is what I would knit for that log. So it meant that my logs weren't even. Some logs were wide, some logs were narrow, depending on how much yarn I had left with the scrap that I had at the time. And I just kept going and going and going until I got a square, and then created close enough to the size that I could do an insert for a cushion, and then knitted up just a block coloured back. And it's fun. It's just a way to use these things up. It's relatively mindless knitting. It's a way to play with colour. And it's almost like a journey. It's you never quite know. It's like the road that you've never quite taken before. You never quite know where it's going to take you. So that is, this log cabin blanket. If you don't quite have enough and you don't think you've got enough to do a log cabin blanket or a cushion, you could do the mitts that Ethan also referred to yesterday as well, called the log cabin mitts. Now these are by Karen Templer, and I've got a link to the blog for these mitts. And these mitts are great, exactly the same concept, all in garter stitch, and that is perfect. I mean, that project there is perfect when I get to the end of this Rambla sweater, you know, to do with something like this. And it then gives you, I mean, I could do it using this Barbosa, because that's what I've got, or I could even do it using the leftover Southlander that I'll probably have at the end as well. So it's about, you know, using up all those little scrappy bits and pieces and actually creating something that's a bit coordinated and a little bit fun, which I think would be really, really cool. So I'm very, very happy with the process in both of those. So when it comes to modular knitting, I actually quite enjoy modular knitting, because whether it be log cabin or whether it be one of my favorite modular projects, which I'm going to show you now, the thing with modular knitting is that it's you're doing everything in really small bites, usually. So if you're somebody that is, you know, you have to burgle a little bit of knitting time here and there because you are busy at home, you know, you've got things in the house, or you've got jobs to do, or you've got kids to organise, or pets that just demand your attention, or you're an essential worker, you're actually out there, you are working, you're having to leave home, put in a huge day at work and then come back, so you're just wanting to burgle and get a little vignette of time where you can just go and breathe. Modular knitting is great because you can pick it up and put it down, and you're generally only working in very small bites or chunks at any given time. So one of my absolute all-time favorite patterns for this, and I have talked about it in the past, but I'm going to talk about it again because there's so many new people here, is the Aranami Shawl. And Aranami Shawl is written by Olga Barayan-Khalifian and Olga Jazzy, as she is known on Ravelry. The shawl, in fact, the one that I have got, the first one that I ever did, which was exact to pattern, was using a 3-ply or a finer fingering weight yarn. So very small needles, very, very fine. I did mine stepped out in colours. She has it all stepped out in 5 different layers of colour. So then you've got this beautiful sort of wave-like graduation. And I did mine in all the shades of Silver Lining Lumiere, and it was absolutely beautiful. And I also did it as a gift. So it has now gone to its recipient, which happens to live in the USA. So that was my first one. But the thing I love about any of these sorts of patterns is that a pattern in a way is just it's a guide. You know, you can actually put your own interpretation on it. So what I loved about the pattern is that obviously it had this modular element, and the first one I knitted was very much just sort of like not really a shawl, it was more a scarf, but I wanted something that was more shawl-like, that was of a decent size that I could actually really wrap myself up in and totally love. And for me, that is actually a garment that needs to be of a pretty decent size, because most standard sort of shawls that they have, you know, she wears in the pattern, if you see photographs, Olga has hers, I call it a scarf, she wears it as a shawl. She is just the tiniest wee dot of a thing. She is so, so, so tiny. And it just, I mean, for her it would be a shawl. It looks beautiful. For me, I needed something bigger. So the next one I did, I actually dove into the stash, and I found this ball of yarn here, which is this graduated one in the middle here. So it was this one, and it was, I'll go this way. As you can see, there were purples, and there was this sort of little bit of like a greeny mustardy colour there, plus a sandy colour there. So it was it was sort of a long ombre printed yarn. It was a single roving yarn. It was a wool blend. It wasn't even 100% wool. I think it was wool nylon, or might have been even wool acrylic, but it was the colour that drew me to it. It was another one of my infamous travel yarns, because as I've mentioned before, I don't necessarily go out and buy souvenirs from places. When I travel, I tend to buy yarn, and this particular yarn I had bought at Morris & Sons in Sydney when I was there on a work trip, and so I had two balls of it only, and it was the colours that drew it to me. It was just, they were just really lovely, beautiful, soft colours, and so yes, 2 balls. All I had was 2 balls. So I thought, what can I do with those two balls and tie them all in together? So this is knitted all entirely from Stash. So I went into Stash, and the first thing I found was this mustard here, which again is vintage. So this was one of the original colours that we had that we were looking to do in vintage. In fact, I think we only did a trial run of it, and then the colour, we ended up moving to a different colour. In fact, I might resurrect that colour. I really like it. It's very similar to our Sprout and Orb. So I had a small amount of that. And then this one down the bottom here is this beautiful biscuity, stony biscuity colour. And this is an alpaca. And this was remnants. So when I say remnants, not even remnants, thread waste. It was just a big bag of sort of wasty thread waste that we get in the shop. But if this is the same, it's almost identical to Mahana. And it just was very, very neutral. And as you can see, it was pretty much dead spit for what was in there. And this one was almost identical. Where is that element? Oh, as you can see, there you go. You can see them. Very, very similar there. So what I did is I then, can you see that? Layered it all up. So then the colours run across the centre with the interest, the middle two rows there being the two balls, and I just had enough to do them, being the two balls that I started with, and then just layered the colour of 2 rows of the biscuit, 2 rows of the green, 2 rows of the graduated, 2 rows of the green, and then 2 and a bit rows. I had enough to do the top. And as you can see, it doesn't all whip this off. It is a decent size. So this is written to pattern. The only difference being is I used double knitting yarn. There you go. Double knitting yarn and 4.5mm needles. Because this is all garter stitch, you can get away with a slightly bigger needle. So how does this work? And do purchase the pattern from Olga and Ravelry because it goes through everything. But essentially, you start, it's a series of stacked triangles. You start with one triangle and you do a decrease. And then you move out and you stack up the next 2 triangles. And then the next layer of triangles. And you just keep going and going and going and going and going. It's quite straightforward. And each triangle is no more than I think around 36 stitches. It's not a huge amount. So it's actually a shawl that can be worked on straight needles, because I know that there are a portion of you out there that just really struggle with the shortness of tips on a circular needle, or if you're an underarm person, if you are knit in that fashion, this shawl is perfect for you because you never have more than 36 stitches on your needle at any given time. So it means that you can actually work it on a very, very small or standard set of straight needles. It's also the skills that you need in this really are just the 2 main skills is obviously garter stitch. You have decreasing. You need to learn a decrease, very straightforward decrease, and you need to learn how to pick up stitches. Now, this is a really fantastic project. If you've actually got someone in your house that's just learned how to knit, they've got garter stitch sort of mastered, and they're really kind of getting sick of doing that big, long, straight scarf, and they're wanting to do something with a little bit more excitement, this is ideal. Absolutely ideal, because the skill level involved for this is just so easy and so straightforward. What I love about this is it is seriously addictive, because you just think, just one more triangle, just one more wave, just one more wave, just I'll just do one more wave before I go to bed. I can tell you I average around, depending on how good TV is and what's going on, around 12 to 15 minutes per triangle. It is so fast, and it is super, super, super addictive. So that's that one that I did. I love this. The one thing I did on the bind off at the end, and Ethan and I, as you can see, this needs depilling. Ethan and I talked about it on the weekend. I had just enough of the ombre yarn that I thought, ooh, I wonder if I'm going to get away. I wonder if I'm going to get away with an I-cord bind off. And that's what that is. That's an I-cord bind off there. And I did. I was really pleased. And it just, that I-cord bind off, and you saw his black and white one yesterday, the I-cord bind off just gives it a really, really clean edge. She has not got that in the pattern. That is actually a modification I have made. But I just think it makes a difference. It gives it a finality to the piece, and it actually helps hold its shape and structure. It's something that I really like the look of. So I'm actually going to put this on because it's cold in here, and I have want to stay warm. I've also done another, and I actually used slightly, did I use the same needle size? It's definitely another DK, and this is great actually if you're a spinner and you've got homespun at home, and a lot of you may have homespun in natural sort of shades and stuff like that, and you're wondering what to do with it. This is one. Now this is all done in our silver lining, and as you can see, there's the 4 different shades of the silver lining, starting from the Clifton Stone at the bottom, 5 Mile Bush, Triple Peak, and then Bell Bush at the top. So if you've actually got quite a bit of this in stash, this works fantastically well for that. Or if you've got any of those graduated yarns, or you know what? Do you know what I love about this? Those little scraps that I talked about. You don't need a huge amount for each triangle. If you've got a whole bunch of little nuggets and scraps, play Lucky Dip. Do Lucky Dip Aranami. Put them in a bag. Put them in a bag that you can't see. Have them all wound up. Complete a triangle. Dip your hand in. Pull it out. That's your yarn for the next triangle. The only proviso is just make sure all the yarns are of the same weight. And I think from memory, if you're doing it in DK, you get something along the lines of about six or 7 triangles to a 50 gram ball. So honestly, I mean, I would have thought I would at least get 2 triangles out of that, if not more. So it doesn't need to be a lot of yarn, and it's just a really fun way to use stuff up and, you know, make your knitting a little bit fun and quirky while we're all here at home. So that's that one there. It doesn't have to stop you there. I started this ages ago. I got in between projects, didn't have anything else on the needles or on the go. I think I just completed a big sample, and I just felt like knitting something that was short, quick and easy, and I love doing those Aranami triangles. So I had a ball of the County Rainbow, and I thought, what would happen if I didn't stack those triangles as she does in the pattern? What would happen if I started the triangles and then just did them end on end? And so far, so this was sort of one evening in front of the telly, and that's what I did. And as you can see, it's developed this quite natural crescent shape. So what I'm possibly now going to do is pick up the stitches across this bottom edge of the crescent and add to it and just see what happens. Well, that's the plan. Who knows? It's a bit of a journey, really. I don't know. But I tell you what, this killed at least a couple of hours in front of the telly, and it stopped me drinking too much. So it's win-win. Win-win. Yeah, so, I mean, don't be afraid. Let your imagination go a little bit wild and do something fun like that. So I think, you know, something like that would be quite good. I mean, it's a bit free form. I think that would be fun. I haven't done much cooking, I'm afraid. I just did a lasagna for tea last night because that's what I had. Oh, Solange has been good. She's been for a bike ride this morning. Oh, I need to get out. I've got to walk the dogs today. Oh, thank you, Deborah. Triangulate is what she's just finished by Stephen West. Shirley was saying that log cabin's her favourite quilt. Yeah, I mean, I've got an aunt who is a huge quilter, and she, when I first showed her that, she was like, oh, that's log cabin for quilting. So yeah, it was, there we go. And Ethan says it is Tennessee. Good, I'm glad I got that right. So yeah, it's really good. I'm just scrolling through to see if there's any other questions there. Vicky was saying she made 3 Aranamis, beautiful to knit, and the first And it was the first wrap in turn for her. Yeah, Vicky, it is fantastic, isn't it? I've loved it. In fact, I think I'm going to probably, if I need a little break from Rambla, I'm going to pick this back up again, just as a wee bit of a, just sometimes you just need to give yourself a break, and it is quite good. Now tomorrow I'm really excited because I'm catching up with Susie Brown tomorrow. Now, for those of you that don't know Susie is the editor of Tiny Studio magazine, and I think I have a copy down here. I mentioned this earlier on in the diaries. I'm really, really lucky because this is actually Susie's copy. It's a print copy. It is actually there we go, focus. It is actually a digital magazine, but she had a couple of print copies made up for samples, physical samples to show people, and this is one of the ones that I took away with me. But what's beautiful about this particular first birthday edition is it is available free from fiberygoodness.com, and it's fibery spelt the American way, E-R-Y, as opposed to R-E-Y. And it's just wonderful, and it's full of loads of inspiration, and not just knitting or crochet. There's spinning, there's different ways to in terms of colors, playing around with bats. There's a whole, this is a collaboration of probably the top articles or stories that she had in the first year of the magazine. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about what she's been up to during her lockdown and all different things, just sort of shake things up a little bit. So that will be loads of fun. And I've also made a list. I've already spoken to some others to bring onto the show. I've got to get Stephen booked in, Stephen Berg, and Nathan is really keen to catch up with you. He's been playing around with his double knitted brioche on the book that he's working on, so we'll talk about that. And then I've got a couple of other people that I want to catch up with you as well. And for and I can't remember who it was yesterday said looking forward to crochet content. I am hatching a plan, so hopefully I'll have some crochet content for you before the 4 weeks is out. So I'm going to get on, because I've got a few things that I want to do, and then I'm quite determined to take the afternoon off. So until then, I hope all is going well at your place. It's going well here at ours, and I will see you guys again tomorrow with the wonderful Susie Brown. Until then, take care, stay safe, stitch on.